So we have the classic Champions League clash this week, Arsenal versus Bayern Munich, probably the best two teams in Europe right now, arguably being coached by the best up-and-coming young coaches in Europe right now, Mikel Arteta and Vincent Kompany, which got me thinking about who should be the next Man City manager after Pep Guardiola, because obviously Arteta worked alongside Pep for 3 years at City, and Vincent Kompany was Pep's first captain, a Man City legend, now making his way in management with Bayern, having spent times at Anderlecht and Burnley. Now, we've got Nedum Onuoha to chat about, Vinny, because you go back quite a long way, don't you, Nedum?
Yeah, we sure do, yeah. This is a guy that I've known for, I think it's coming up to like 15, no, to be fair, it's more than 15 years now. And it's interesting to see the sort of arc that he's been on, because I think what some people forget was the fact that like he was signed before the takeover happened. So he was almost part of like a different group of players, but then he was so good and significant for the club that he now falls out on this side of things as an icon for, say, for the newer ownership. But yeah, I've known him from when he was at Hamburg. And he was wearing the number 10. That's right, Vincent Kompany was wearing the number 10. And to add to that, he was actually playing in some ways like a number 10. I remember it was him and Rafael van der Vaart with Nigel de Jong behind them. And I thought, wow, this guy's all right. Because we all knew him from, say, Football Manager and all that stuff. But yeah, to get a chance to see him play and then spend a few days with him through a mutual friend we have, who actually is part of his coaching staff now at the moment, Floribert Ngaloula. He was good. And then before you know it, he's at Man City. But even his first bit at Man City, he was riddled with injuries a little bit, and significant injuries, which he was trying to force his way through. But we didn't see the best version of him. But as time passed and he settled into being a centre-back, and not just a centre-back, one of the best ones in the Premier League. I think the rest of it kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about, Kompany's, his character and his credentials in a minute, but just, the premise is Pep Guardiola, his future, and then none of us know when Pep Guardiola is going to leave Man City. He's been there for almost 10 years now, and he could be there for another 10, he could be there for another 10 months, we just don't know. But as it stands right now, we know that a few kind of contenders have fallen by the wayside over the years. Patrick Vieira was a player that was, as a manager, that was kind of tipped to be the next Man City manager. That hasn't happened. People like Brendan Rodgers, I know Andoni Iraola gets a mention as well, but I think we kind of agreed, Nathan, that Vinny right now is putting himself in a great position to be the next Man City manager if the timing works out.
Yeah, I totally see that now. I'll be honest, I was so I'm biased, and obviously I believe in him as a coach, but I think it was going to be a harder sell if, for example, he would have become the next Man City manager after leaving Burnley, because that jump itself almost feels a bit too big. I think from when he started off at Anderlecht, I believe, and then he goes to Burnley and he does well in the Championship, but then struggles a little bit in the Premier League, which is understandable given the fact that, it's Burnley in that situation. And I think himself and others probably say that they were probably promoted a year or two too early, which seems like a crazy thing to say, but, that is the sentiment in terms of the squad building that they had. But then he goes to Bayern Munich, and he goes to Bayern Munich in some ways as somebody expected to fail, because he apparently wasn't their first choice, nor the second, nor the third, in some ways, maybe not even the fourth. But instead, he's helped them, retain their title last year, taking it back from Leverkusen, who obviously had that amazing season. But as well as that, he started this year, and he's, I think they won 16 games in a row. And I think for most of us who are casual observers of football, you think of Bayern Munich and you think of the German league and you say, well, that must be something that happens all the time for them. But it's not. We're talking about a record which has existed for decades. And you can see the way he's getting the team to play. You can hear about the way that he's managing the media as well, having to manage the board. And being the head coach of Bayern Munich is one of the toughest jobs, not just in Germany, but I would argue in world football. So for him to be thriving in that environment, I think that was like almost the final check for me to say, well, yeah, this guy can definitely do this. And obviously he's still young. I think he's still technically in his 30s for a few more months at least. But it feels like he's ready. And I think for the way that football's going, I don't know if you'd agree, but like younger managers aren't being sort of looked down upon the same way that they were maybe 10, 15 years ago. And somebody who's about to reach into their 40s seems a lot more appealing, especially because you look back and people like Arteta and others have managed to do that.
Mark, let me just ask you one about this, because, big clubs will often tell you that they put a lot of effort into succession planning. They want to have a plan for their managers going forward. But often with this kind of thing, that, and Nedum sort of mentioned it in the column that's on the site, that timing is everything, that you can have the best plans in the world. You can sort of look at data and things and decide the kind of the fit that you want for your manager. But really, nothing beats that timing. And if the timing is right, that's when you end up getting these big jobs.
It is, yeah, and it is all about timing. Like Nedum said, 18 months ago, Vinny Kompany was never getting the Man City job, but, 18 months, 2 years on, and I guess he's a front runner. Listen, I think Mikel Arteta is obviously a candidate, but I just don't see Mikel Arteta leaving Arsenal because he's the face of Arsenal right now, and Arsenal are a historic club, biggest club in London that have got obviously a platform to go on to do bigger and better things. So I'd be staggered if he was tempted away from Arsenal and go to Man City, despite obviously the riches that Man City can offer. But City for me are probably the best run club in the country, if not the best run club in Europe, albeit the world. So I'm sure they have a plan, and they may surprise us. I mean, Liverpool surprised everybody by going for Arne Slot. I don't think anybody would have called that one. So City may have somebody up the sleeve that they know is coming in, that they know is the guy that's going to replace Pep Guardiola. They may already know when Pep's going, but I think only Pep knows when he's going. He probably doesn't even know that yet. So it's a tricky one to time. But I think one thing that kind of struck me when I was speaking to Nedum, he made the point that, when you're playing it or managing the biggest clubs, if you're at Liverpool or Man United, there's only kind of a Real Madrid that can tempt you away because you're playing at the biggest and the best anyway. Vincent Kompany's at Bayern Munich, biggest club in Germany, one of the biggest clubs in the world. But the line that Nedum came out with was that Man City is Vinny's Real Madrid. And I understand that because, his wife and kids are from Manchester. He's been probably Man City's greatest ever captain. So it would obviously fit for him to go back to Man City. And I think, there's a great story that Nedum tells about Vincent's kind of character and what he's like as a leader. It's not, I saw him in the press conference in Paris after the PSG win a couple of weeks ago. I was so impressed by the fact he comes in, he speaks, he takes questions in French, in German, in English. He tells his media officer, no, I'll take some more questions. So the persona is very impressive, but I wanted to know what he's like as a warrior, as a character. And the story that Nedum told me about his occasion against Samuel Eto'o was a good one.
Yeah, he's you people obviously have to go and read the piece itself. I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, it's very much a Vincent Kompany story. And once you read it, you'll be like, yeah, that's exactly the player that I saw from his years at Man City and elsewhere as well.
But obviously, do you think he's got the character to take the pressure of being the next guy in at Man City? I guess it's like following Klopp at Liverpool or following Sir Alex Ferguson at Man United.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And those jobs, they almost feel like they're impossible, but football will continue to move on. You look at, say, Arsenal now, and it's taken a long time, but, Arteta's been at Arsenal for a long time now, and you can see him being there for a long time to come, which kind of feels like an Arsene Wenger type in some ways. And I think if he does, and to be fair, I've got to back up the point that you've said, because there'll be some people say, why would you leave Bayern Munich for Man City? And in some ways, in terms of scale of a job, I get it. Bayern Munich, an absolute European powerhouse, domestic like kings, there's so much pressure on that. But people are motivated by lots of different things, and for him, like his family's from Manchester. He spent a lot of time in his life in Manchester. So you could see the appeal of that job in itself. So I think it is going to be very, very interesting to see like what happens from a timing standpoint. What happens if, say, the job was dropped on his toes now, because he is somebody as well that does believe in loyalty, for him as a player, for him as a manager and so on. Like, it's a big deal. And the job that he's doing at Bayern, I think he'll feel that it's not done yet, because it's great that he's won the league. But I can list you every other Bayern Munich manager that's won the league before. I think maybe in the last, say, 10, 15 years, you can almost be defined by the managers that have won the Champions League. So does he stay until that job is done, if that job will ever be done? Or is it a case of he's always going to have one eye on, say, the place that he's probably is footballing home?
It's a good point that Nedum makes about, why would you leave Bayern Munich? But I remember having a conversation with a couple of people connected with City a couple of years ago. It was at a time when Pep, there was doubt whether he was going to sign a new contract. And the conversation turns to, who would you get? Who could possibly replace Pep? And the name that they mentioned was Nagelsmann at Bayern Munich. And the natural reaction for us to sort of say, well, but he's a young coach, he's got this fantastic big job at Bayern Munich. Why on earth would he come to City? And they kind of said, well, but you have to understand that City now is the place to be for managers. They can offer managers conditions that almost any other club in the world can't offer. And you used to have to ask Pep Guardiola about why he's been so successful. It's because the conditions that he's been able to work with, whether that's a budget, whether that the freedom to have a say in kind of recruitment, working with the sporting director, whether it's Cheeky or Hugo Viana now. So whether it was Vincent Kompany or anyone else, that when it comes time for City to replace Pep Guardiola, they will back themselves to go and get their number one target, regardless of whether they're in charge of Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Inter Milan, AC, any of these big clubs in Europe, because of the status that City have and what they've been able to do for Pep Guardiola, the success that they've shown that they can give to these managers. They'll back themselves to go and get anyone. And obviously it's not as much of an issue with Vincent Kompany, is it? Because he's obviously got that connection with City and their fans. And I wanted to ask you, Nedum, just in terms of City and their fans, say it was to be Vincent Kompany, how do you think that would be received by not so much the club, but the actual fan base themselves?
I think it'd be incredible, to be honest. As far as like the type of moment or signing, whether it's managerial appointment or whatever, that a club and its fans could only potentially dream of, especially if he's to end up being successful. Because I think most fans want to have somebody on the side who's relatable. They want to have people on the field who are relatable. That whole drive towards academy people who've had experience and so on. And that in some ways would be outside of, say, the last, decade that Guardiola's given to Man City. Like, that is essentially almost like a utopia for them, because here is a familiar face who means so much to the club through his playing times, from him lifting the Premier League trophy in 2012. If he can then be on the sideline knowing that, and the fans to know that he has that level of desire and passion about the football club that they do, I think that goes a long, long way. So if he was to be the person that came in, like, don't get me wrong, it'd be a very, very tough job. To follow in the boots of Pep Guardiola, wherever he's been, has always been very, very tough. But I think he's definitely somebody that's capable of doing that. And also, like, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think one of the reasons Mikel Arteta has done so well at Arsenal is because at the start he was afforded more time because he has a connection to the football club. And I think as a consequence, if Vincent Kompany was to be the next guy after Guardiola, if things weren't perfect from the get-go, I think he would be afforded more time, because I believe, again, that they'll understand what he needs to do and what he wants to do, but they'll know that he has a care for the club that maybe someone else might not have. So instead of the next manager being, relatively speaking, more like an Unai Emery, maybe it's more of like a Mikel Arteta, in the fact that, he's played for the club, he understands it, and he's going to say, just believe in us. And, as we can potentially see with Arsenal this year, like, maybe this is the end product.
And obviously, if Kompany came in, he'd be perceived by the fans as one of our own. And if you're one of their own, you get more time, more buy-in, because the fans want to see the local hero doing well. And it all adds together, doesn't it? So obviously, we talk about Vinny's character and his kind of his track record, his past. But from a football perspective, he's coached 3 teams now: Anderlecht, Burnley, and Bayern Munich. I guess that each one has been a kind of a nuance into a tactical approach. If he went to Man City, I mean, Pep's had so many tactical changes over the years, but would his game plan, would his approach suit the squad he's got? Would it appeal to the supporters? Would it appeal to the ownership? But does Vinny have the game plan to take on Man City after Pep?
Yeah, I think so. I think he absolutely does. But I think so. Pep has managed over 1,000 games now. He's seen so many different types of games and so on, and he's seen his team for the most part be like the protagonist, and he's enjoyed that part. And every so often, there's a gritty performance which Guardiola will enjoy as well. But I think Vinny, I think he loves the sort of dogfight part of things as well. And I think he loves the Premier League for everything, whether it's the long throws, whether it's the set pieces, whether it's the nice bit of play, false nine, wingers, like a left-foot winger on the left, that type of thing. Like, he loves all that stuff. So I think from my perspective, like, to see how you do at City, I think you look at the way that he's sort of setting up his buy-in side, and it's not just one rigid system, which means that we'll only get one thing. Like, the outcome that he wants is to be able to control games of football and score tons of goals and not concede too many. Not in a way whereby, they take humongous risks and as a consequence getting sliced open every couple of minutes. That's not the case. I think it requires bravery, but then also the way he looks at games is he tries to think how the opposition will play against you, and then as a consequence give the players solutions to try and break that down. And I think in the Premier League, that variance in terms of how teams will go up against you is key, if you can have the right personnel and the right understanding to try and break that down. Because, essentially, if you're going to be winning a league title, you have to find ways every single week. Like, no 2 games are ever the same. So I think he will do well. He wants to see attacking football. He wants his strikers to be scoring tons of goals. He wants contribution from elsewhere. He wants to be dangerous from set pieces. And he wants to try and be as solid in defense as possible, because, he's Vincent Kompany. So yeah, you look at the Bundesliga now, and obviously Bayern Munich have a lot of talent, but they've scored the most goals by far, and I think they've conceded the fewest as well. And there's some players in that team who are playing some of their best football in their careers to date. So I think some of that comes down to the coaching, comes down to the methodology, and the plan he gives his players, because they all believe in it, and we can see that they're very successful with it as well.
You just mentioned earlier on, Nedum, about he might want to stay at Bayern to win the Champions League, because that's what Bayern Munich managers are defined by. The top of the league stage right now, and after watching them against Paris, I think that they have to be classed as, if not the favourites, one of the favourites, because they've beaten Paris Saint-Germain, that the actual reigning champions in Paris, and down to 10 men. So Arsenal's a big test on Wednesdays to kind of whether Bayern are the real deal. But do you think, first of all, can he win the Champions League with Bayern this season? And if he did, what would that do for him? Would that be like, there you go, guys, I'm on my way now, or there you go, guys, I can't leave you anymore because I've won the Champions League?
Yeah. Do you know, it's a great question. It's a great question. I think, obviously, they are capable of doing it. I think some of the teams that will end up in the top 4 or 5 in this league phase now, you know that they are capable. But then in the second half of the season, it comes down to timing. It comes down to like form in those key moments, injuries and so on. Because many a team started off really well, but then sort of faded away. Like an example is Liverpool last season, for example. So I think they are capable of doing it, but it is very, very tough. Very, very, very tough. And I think themselves and Arsenal right now, I think as you start the conversation with, I think they're probably 2 of the best sides in Europe at this moment in time. And it's to a certain extent not even that close because you back them to go up against anybody and get a result. So I think the fact that they went away to PSG, they went down to 10, and they showed the grit to be able to win that game, I think that is a big deal because more often we're seeing Bayern have more of the ball, create more chances, and just have the players to go and just win games of football. But for that, they had to dig in with the players that they have. And it seemed like the players enjoyed it, the manager enjoyed it, and obviously the result is a big part of that. But if a team can battle like that and they can have the flair and sort of attacking prowess of like a Kane, Luis Diaz, Michael Elise, Nabries and so on, then that's a really ominous sign because it shows that they are drifting towards being a very complete side.
Nedum, can I just ask one final one on Vincent? You obviously know him better than anyone. What kind of personality is he? Is he the kind of guy who will have his career mapped out in a way that kind of we've seen players map out their careers recently, or is he more of a timing guy that he's happy to kind of take whatever in front of him and he'll just kind of make decisions as and when they come to him?
I think in some ways he'll have ideas. He'll plan for his side and he'll plan for his side to be successful and to sort of maximize their potential. But in terms of opportunity, you can't decide when that's going to come because I'd imagine for him, as is the case with pretty much everyone else that was paying attention to the situation a year and a bit ago, having the season that Burnley had that led to relegation probably doesn't lead you towards managing Bayern Munich. So I think if he would have had that in his plan, then everyone would have said he was crazy at the start of his time in the Premier League with Burnley. But I think there'll be places around the world and around Europe and the world that he wants to coach. I think he want to test himself in the toughest leagues in the world and do it in a manner where, it doesn't just get given, if you know what I mean. So I think somewhere within his mind, I think he'll have a plan to come to the Premier League. I think he will because I think he loves the Premier League. He loves to play in it. Even to this day, he's somebody that's probably still watching it and he sees the talent and he recognises so many teams, so many people from it as well. So it means something to him. So I think that plan will be there. But this is the most important point for me really here. He's still so young that sometimes we try and rush people to take some of these opportunities. Like when the last time this was being discussed, I think when the season started, maybe Roy Hodgson was still in the Premier League and Roy Hodgson was literally twice the age of Vincent Kompany. So if you think about the fact that your career could be your life lived all over again, then maybe when the timing's right, he will come. But for my sake, I think while he's doing as well as he is now and continuing to improve, obviously I don't want to see Pep Guardiola leave. I think he's my favourite coach of all time. But if there's somebody to replace him, to hand the Manchester City keys over to someone, I think that's somebody that will look after the club and, potentially try and bring it back to its glory as well.
I thought for a minute then you were suggesting Roy Hodgson for Man City, Nathan. On that note, it's a fantastic week of Champions League football ahead. Arsenal v Bayern, top of the bill. Back next week, probably after Chelsea Arsenal, which is a massive top of the table clash. So thanks, Nedum, for your time, and we will speak to you soon.
Yes, sir.